Spirit, open my heart to the joys and pain of living. As you love, may I love in receiving and in giving. Spirit, open my heart. God, replace my stony heart with a heart that's kind and tender. All my coldness and fears, to your grace I now surrender. Spirit, open my heart to the joys and pain of living. As you love, may I love in receiving it.
Before you on the table, you see the symbols of this last week of Jesus' life. Palms left from the grand parade, his triumphal entry into Jerusalem that soon turned painful and tragic. The elements of a meal shared in an upper room with friends the last time they would gather at table together. A familiar act, but couched in words that have shaped the communion table forever since. This is my body, this is my blood, all shed, broken, given for you. Then you see the signs of mockery, the robe that was placed upon him, and a sign counting King of the Jews, a crown not of gold and precious gemstones, but a crown of thorns. The coins there, a bag of coins paid to the one who betrayed him, and the sponges covered with vinegar that were placed to his lips to ease the pain, to give him thirst, or just more agony. You will hear the text from the Gospel of Mark that tell of this whole time. Consider these visually as you hear the story again. Perhaps for the first time, perhaps in a new way. May we listen together.
The garden. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples,
"Sit here while I pray."
He took with him Peter and James and John and began to be distressed and agitated. And he said to them,
"My soul is deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake."
And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said,
"Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want."
He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter,
"Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake for 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak."
And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And once more he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a third time and said to them,
"Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough, for the hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. Look, my betrayer is at hand."
Betrayal and arrest. Immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, and with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." And so when he came, he went up to him at once and said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. And then they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one of those who stood near drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. And Jesus said to them,
"Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me, as though I were a rebel? Day after day I was with you in the temple, teaching, and you did not arrest me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled."
All of them deserted him and fled.
Trial and Peter's denial. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priest and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands.' But even on this point, their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, 'Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?' But he was silent and did not answer. Again the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?' And Jesus said,
"I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, and coming with the clouds of heaven."
Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?" All of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, to strike him, saying to him, "Prophesy." The guards also took him and beat him.
While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the female servants of the high priest came by. She saw Peter warming himself. She stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I do not know or understand what you are talking about." And then he went out into the forecourt, and then the cock crowed. And the female servant, on seeing him again, began again to say to bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. And then after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean, you talk like that one." Then he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." And at that moment the cock crowed for the second time. And then Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him,
"Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times."
And he broke down and wept.
Before Pilate. As soon as it was morning, the chief priest held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him,
"You say so."
Then the chief priest accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you?" But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the festival he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone for whom they asked. Now a man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priest had handed him over. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again, "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you called the king of the Jews?" And they shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why, what evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified.
Path to the cross. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters. And they called together the whole crowd, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. And they began to salute him, shouting, "Hail, King of the Jews! Hail, King of the Jews!" They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and then knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes upon him, and then they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. And then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take.
Hours on the cross. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified 2 rebels, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by him derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself, come down from the cross." And in the same way, the chief priest, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." And those who were crucified with him also taunted him. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice,
"Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he is calling for Elijah." And someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, and put it on a stick, gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." And then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now, when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in his way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was God's son."
There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph and of Salome. And when she followed him, and he was in Galilee, and had ministered to him there, and there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem.
Burial. When evening had come, and since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself waiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate wondered if he were already dead, and summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he had been dead for some time. When he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. Then Joseph bought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth and laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of rock. He then rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where the body was laid.